So, how do we have a great sex talk with our kids? This is really important for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is that our kids really need it, right? Our relationships, our sexuality is part of the rest of our adult life. And having that foundation of actually how to do it well, how to be successful, how to learn from it, how to be nurtured by it, how to nourish each other by it. This is a really important gift to give our children. The second reason is connecting to our teens. At this age, there is such a huge gap. People really struggle with the teenage years. And the number one reason is that the one thing our kids are most, completely involved in, this whole burgeoning relationships and sexuality, is the one thing that we don't want to talk about. So it creates an incredible rift between us. So this is a really, really important channel of communication to open. And the third thing is, we have a lot of wisdom to share, and a lot more than you know. And it seems hard to imagine because, when we were growing up, what were we taught? Don't do it. Don't have sex. And if you do, use a condom. So we think, so I'm not sure what else I can tell them. But the reality is we've had a lot of experiences since then. And the experiences that we have to share really can help our kids. So it's very important. And we get to do what no generation has ever done before because they were all too nervous to talk about it. So, yay us. So where do we start? We start by leveling the playing field. Nobody knows everything there is to know about sexuality, relationships, and what's possible. This is really important for us to know, even as adults. The reality is that if we are connected to our partners, we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea what these incredible bodies are capable in every moment. We can get caught into ruts, which is something we can share with our kids. You can get caught in ruts where you kind of do the same thing all the time. But the reality is if we're present with our partner, anything's possible. So we can tell our kids this. I've been teaching tantra for years, and when my kids were teenagers, and today in their 20s, I could easily say to them, completely honestly, every time I'm with someone, it's a brand new experience. I have no idea what's going to happen this time. When we create this level playing field, our kids they have a chance to be heard because suddenly their experiences are just as valid as ours. And they are burgeoning adults now. So it's very, very important that we are now having an adult to an adult conversation, especially about sex. The next thing I want to talk about is the quality of connection. Because regardless of what the bodies are doing, the bodies know how to make love. The bodies know how to touch and how to, find pleasure from each other if we get our minds out of the way. The quality of that touch, the quality of that experience is 100% connected to the quality of the connection with the person we're with. We know this. If the nature of our relationship is kind, then the lovemaking will be kind. If the quality of the relationship is controlling, the lovemaking will be controlling. If the relationship is distant, the lovemaking will be distant. If the quality of the relationship is based on fantasy, if we've created something that we want the other person to be, or if we've watched a lot of movies or porn or that kind of thing and we have our minds filled with what this is going to look like and what you're supposed to sound like and what you're supposed to do next, then we're going to put that into our sex life too. So the quality of the connection really matters. And I'm going to say something here that may be strange as a parent, but there's this whole thing right now about having a friend with benefits, which, if you don't know, means you're not necessarily romantically involved, but maybe you fool around. Maybe you even have sex. And I have to say that as a parent, it's something that I think is a pretty good idea. It's a nice place for kids to actually be able to explore without all the heaviness of the romance and all that. They actually just get to be loving. And strangely enough, there's a lot more kindness and loving between friends than there often is in romantic relationships. There tends to be so many of all the same issues and the power struggles and the self-worth issues that we all struggle with. That happens in the teenage years too. And then to involve sex with all that, it can really set us up for some bad precedents for the rest of our lives. So, if you find out that your kids have friends with benefits, it may not be such a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a great thing. We can teach them the joy of exploration. To not always go in with an idea of what you want to do. To look at this person that you are friends with or in love with or whatever and kind of go, what's going on today? Are we cuddling? Are we making out? Are we having sex? Like, what is it? And then even within that, to teach them to just explore, to just see what comes, see what happens. Don't go in with an idea. Don't go in with a goal. Allow each time to be really new. And you can share, times from your youth, when you were just making out, you were just exploring, or you were just having fun, I'm not sure we had sex quite as soon as they do today. So I think we maybe spent more time exploring. So you may have more stories there. And again, no details, unless they really want details, they ask questions. But it's the sense and what you took from it that matters, and how you felt close and you felt touched. And touch is a really important thing because we're a little touch deprived in our society. So to even be able to say, oh, I just love to cuddle sometimes, or I used to love just kissing or just dancing or whatever, that all of these things are a beautiful exploration of each other. This is a great thing to share. We want to talk to our kids about consent. This is really important, and it's not just in dating. It's not just avoiding date rape. It's also in long-term relationships. Because in previous generations, in my generation and before, there was a definite feeling of obligation that if you were in a long-term relationship and you were committed, then you couldn't have sex with anyone else, so your partner now was obligated to have sex with you. And the problem with this is it sets up resentment, which then sets up less sex, then sets up more resentment and more problems. So it's a real issue. Whereas when we're taught that, whether you have sex or not is always up to you, and that we still love each other, even if one person says no or they're not in the mood that night. But then if people don't want to have sex for a long time, then to really look at the relationship and to go, wow, what's going on with us? How come we never want to be intimate? Let's deal with that. So around the consent issue, it really can go into a much deeper quality of relationship question. And we all have a lot to share there. And it's really, really important that they know that in or out of a long-term committed relationship, consent always matters. It's always important. And we all have lots of experience with that. So it is important to talk about porn, kind of open up that conversation. And not in a judgmental way to say, don't do it, it's evil, blah, blah, don't do that. But to actually give context. One, to tell them that these are actors. They're either professional, they're either porn stars, or they're amateurs and they're just being filmed on a phone or a little, handheld thing. But regardless, they're acting. It isn't necessarily real. The pleasure they're feeling and the pleasure you're hearing isn't necessarily happening. They're acting for the camera. What they're doing might be very titillating to watch, but it may not be as pleasurable in the actual act as you think. So it isn't actually a great place to learn anything, And with that, you can say to them, because the reality is your body knows what to do. You don't have to rely on what you see and what you've seen in porn. If you actually just are present with someone, your body can find that pleasure, So this is just some context we can give it. But the most important thing about porn you have to talk about is that it creates such a rich fantasy life in our minds. And what happens is we have this fantasy and then we impose it on the person we're with. And then that person isn't even real. They're just kind of the human form of this idea I have in my mind. And this completely obliterates our ability to actually connect and have real intimacy. and even real pleasure in this world, right? Because it's always just fantasy. It's always just imagining. Some of the challenges is some people are actually afraid to even be with real people. Maybe the first 400 sexual experiences they had were sitting in front of a computer watching porn. The idea of actually being with a real person is quite terrifying. So to really find the words to kind of go, it's all good, you know. Real people are fine. We just have to relax and enjoy and be with that person, and it'll work out. So there's real fears that have been caught up there. Some people say too that I've had people tell me that they've gone celibate because the thoughts in their minds aren't theirs. The fantasies, what they think they want, their desires, they're like, I don't even know what's mine and what I've just been watching for 20 years. So they choose to go celibate for a while, completely no masturbation, no sex, no anything, to actually clear their mind so when they actually are with a real person, they're actually doing what they want to do, not what some, videographer did. So this is just important. It's not to tell kids not to do it. It's just important to say, you know what, here's some realities around it that are really important to think about. It's also really important today to be open about gender and orientation. In the olden days, there were men and there were women and there was heterosexual relationships. And today, thankfully, we're wide open. What matters is that people love each other, that they are connected, that they're gentle and they're kind and they're loving. That's all that matters. Whatever their gender is, whatever their orientation is, it doesn't matter. And you can share that, and that's important for kids to know because not all kids have that at home. And maybe your kids have friends that they need someone to talk to, and maybe their parents are uncomfortable or their family's uncomfortable. So everybody needs that safe place to go where they can be really open about who they are, what they feel, and how they're experiencing this transition into relationships that we all definitely struggled with. It's also really important to be honest about our own hang-ups around sexuality. If there was abuse, if there was hurt, heartache, everything. Because everything we talk about will be tainted by this truth. And if we tell our kids one thing, but they can feel something else in the room, like that elephant that no one's talking about, they're not going to trust what we're saying. So find the time, find the way to share, and it could just be, you can say, I have a few hang-ups around this because I was abused when I was young, or I was raped in university, or this person broke my heart and I'm a little jaded now. Just so that they understand the context in what you're sharing. And this is very real because understand heartbreak, rape, all these things is part of their life. It may not be part of their personal life, but it's part of their friend's life and it's all around them. And for you to share this is super important for them to know because it also makes us very human. And again, it helps us connect in a teenage time when it's really, really difficult to connect with our kids. You don't want to give them details that are going to upset them and give them nightmares, but at least for them to understand your takeaway, for them to understand why you act the way you act, and maybe even why you have walls up about certain things. This is all good, and it really, really forges that bond between you. And then to finish off by reiterating the fact that there's so much out there. There's so much to explore, whether it's sacred sexuality or tantra or intimacy or, conscious loving. There's so many great things out there now that anything's possible, that it's not stagnant. You don't just have to fall into a pattern and just do the same thing over and over and over again. There's actually deeper ways to connect than our parents ever knew, and you can even say than I even know. There's so much more available now. And this will create such an incredible foundation for them to know that they're okay, the wisdom is within them, and they can just simply explore and relax about it. And it also creates such a beautiful communication between us, that we actually can go, wow, so we can just talk about this anytime? That's awesome. So good luck, have fun, and do what no generation before us has ever done.